How profitable are comic companies? Well, I mean, not very. Is the quick answer, but it's more complicated than that. Let's get into it. Hey, there's this Perch. How profitable are comic companies? So it's a complicated question to answer. I think on the smaller scale, the indies and a lot of the whether you're Boom or IDW or Alterna or these kinds of companies, not very. You're making money in some cases, you're losing money in other cases, but not at nowhere. This isn't like a rapidly growing huge business. And there are a bunch of people trying to figure it out, kind of with different angles and different things, and people, taking money from here or there or trying different bets in order to grow that market at the indie level. And some of those bets will pay off. Other bets will just prove to be more trouble than they are worth, and the game will continue. But at the big company level, at the Image is kind of let's leave them to the side for a moment. Let's talk DC and Marvel. How profitable are they? Well, first off, you got to dissect that business. There's comics and there's graphic novels and there's licensing opportunities and then there's auxiliary revenue and bets that they get from their parent, and so there's a lot going in there. It's not simple because these numbers get often obscured, especially because these companies are not private in their own right. They're actually part of larger companies. So they don't have to break down their business by saying, okay, merchandise is doing this and comics are doing this. And they don't have to break it down that way. And they don't. And it's probably a good thing they don't, because I think you'd see some pretty wild kind of imbalances between different product offerings that they do. But how profitable are they? Well, the short answer is profitable. And I know some people have disagreed with this and they've speculated on other things and all the rest. But there's a reason why these companies keep kind of churning out comics and making the bets they do and doing what they do. And it's not because they just want to run a business into the ground for fun. It's because the business, as a whole, isn't being run into the ground. There's different parts of it that are definitely profitable and supporting kind of other elements. So it's a complicated answer. But why I wanted to hit on this topic is kind of the follow up question to how profitable these companies are. So one of the things you may have noticed, and I think nobody has admitted to this, but if you're in the industry, you talk to artists, and not just the disgruntled ones, but any of them. There's definitely and Moneyball is the wrong term to describe it, but there's definitely a scheme or a process of having kind of a lower portfolio of top tier artists, and in particular on the art side, and then having a large stable of what you could call second tier artists. And that may be too generous a term for it, but it's basically, you have superstars, you have your Oliver Capil, you have let's just stick with him for a second. You have people at that level who are going to sell books, good talent. You can put them on covers, you can put them on interiors, and you can launch books with people like that. And then you have, kind of people you haven't maybe heard before, or people who are, coming up in their career, hopefully. And you have other people who, are not necessarily going down in their career, but just don't have a big career path in general in front of them. And they're the kind of bread and butter of comics. And this has always been the case to some extent. I mean, if you look at the 80s, a lot of people point to, Jim Shooter level of, he wouldn't stand for this kind of quality. That always sticks in my mind. So I know I reference it probably more than I should. But in his business, he was managing a portfolio of books. So you have a book, you have a top tier title, and you're going to put, this quality of artist on them. And that's, you're going to kind of put some time and attention there. And you have your secondary titles in your portfolio, and you're going to spend less money there because they bring in less money, and you're going to manage your portfolio just like if it was stock or anything. You're managing your portfolio books, and you're putting appropriate talent based on the revenue that the book's going to bring in. But that model has shifted a little bit. I think it is. People say no, it's always been this way. It always has, but not at the percentage levels we have today. And we have had dips in the past where you had fewer big names and you have more unknown names coming up. And you've definitely had those moments as people move around, and one company grabs up some talent from the other company, and so on. But you've got a pretty high percentage now of in some cases overseas talent, in other cases, and I don't mean that like top tier overseas talent. I'm talking like, and a sweatshop is in going way too far, but just almost job shop level people who you're pulling out to make the book more profitable. So now back to my original question: how profitable are these companies? Well, part of that profit margin is propped up by the fact that they're paying less for talent, or they're paying the same for talent. And here's where you'll get some fierce disagreement, and you get in some argument. You also get into people not wanting to reveal their numbers. But I can tell you, it is factually true. Like, no opinion, no speculation. It is a fact that the amount that is spent per books, and keep in mind, the publisher, in particular Marvel, are publishing a lot more books than they did 20 years ago. So there's more content that needs to be produced. The amount that is spent is less or level, depending on the given month, to what they were spending 10 years ago. And that, when you think about inflation coming in and you think about the boom of more titles coming in, it should be flat or spending more, because there's higher demand, there's a lot of entertainment choices, there's competition that aren't, it isn't comic, but just competition for time and eyeballs and wallets. So it would, and on top of that, these properties are creating billion-dollar IPs for their parents, which is where the big money is. So it would be, I could see a very reasonable strategy where the big two publishers were break even or even lost money if they were putting really popular seeding talents onto titles to create new characters that could catch in and help boost the films. Some have said that there's not a connection between the films and the comics. There absolutely is a connection, and it's a much safer bet if you're going to put 100 million or more into a movie to produce it and market it, and to be able to have a built-in dedicated fan base that's going to do a lot of your marketing and your evangelizing for you. I mean, you look at even something like Captain Marvel, which has been derided in cases in social media. Part of the reason it did well, and part of the reason it was a safer bet, is because Marvel did not have to do all the, or not Marvel, Disney didn't have to do all the marketing themselves. There were fans who were saying, "I know this character. I've been looking forward to this character. I'm going to see this character," and you have that kind of built-in push, and that's important. It's called lowering your risk. And so you could make an argument of, hey, if you're going to launch a new character, we should put some, top tier A class artist on it, because and lose money on the book, because we're going to create this platform. We're going to get some fans engaged. We're going to get people behind it, and as the movie comes out, we're going to have a lot of built-in comic art we can then leverage that we can go to. I mean, one of the challenges is if you're the MCU and you're putting out, and God, I know this is going to irritate people for sure, but if you're putting out the Miss Marvel movie or the Squirrel Girl movie, your available art, that little, and they don't do it anymore, but remember the old panel flip logo at the beginning where you see comic art that was related to the character you're about to watch in the movie, and it was kind of rapidly, flowing through, and you see a bunch of classic scenes of the comic. Um, what do you do for some of these new characters? You don't have a lot of those scenes. You don't have a lot of those classic panels. In many cases, with some of the newer characters, I mean, Squirrel Girl has, whether you like her or you don't like her, Erica Henderson kind of defined a lot of who that character is. There certainly were older versions, Mike Deodato. There's been other artists that have done that character over the years, but the bulk of that character's work now has been done by Erica Henderson. So when you're promoting this movie, you're pretty much going to have to buy all in on Henderson. It's not like Cap or Iron Man or Thor or some of these other characters who had multiple legendary artists on them over the years. So you have a lot of material and content to pull from, and that helps strengthen the movie. You don't have that here. So, what are you going to do? I think that just to kind of cut to the chase, I think these companies are holding on to profitability in a business that arguably shouldn't be profitable. Certainly with the tail of where the real money is made, I think they're sacrificing or hurting their ability to build a platform for these movies that will catch up to them and will be a problem. I think, that the profit margin needs to be dialed back a little bit. I've heard various numbers on what Marvel makes on comics and in terms of a margin. And I've heard a lot of numbers, so many that I don't know what to trust. But I've heard everything from 40 to 20% margin. And then once I mentioned that just to a guy on Digital and Marvel who just laughed in my face and said, "No, we don't make anywhere close to that." I don't think so. Maybe. Again, I'm not reading their books and their numbers are obscured, so I don't know for sure. But it certainly feels like the profit margin they make from cost to sale is, has, let's put it this way, has room to pay more for talent. Just say it that way. Whatever that margin is, whatever it is, I think there's room within the old Disney budget to make a little bit less in the comics, pay a little bit more to the artists, and build up a stronger platform as a result. Otherwise, I think the rising cost of comics, the increased competitiveness of other offerings, streaming, games, other things, it's just going to sandwich in a bad way these properties in the middle, and they're going to get crushed. And eventually, yeah, it's going to be hard to move a comic. And then eventually, yeah, it's going to be hard to move a movie because you don't have that base. And I think that base is actually quite important. I think otherwise, you're solely relying on the movie itself, the marketing that the movie can drum up for itself, and that will hurt you. It will hurt you long term, and it will take away a lot of your tail. And I think they will find a little bit of this out with Disney Plus as they start putting these series out. And it's like, okay, now we have to pump more out, and the comics aren't helping us as much anymore. So now it's standing on its own. Is it going to be able to do its job? And I think there's a question mark there. So that's anyway. How profitable are big companies? Profitable, hard to tell how much, but I suspect, my gut tells me, and I could be absolutely wrong. And once again, I've had pros. I I had an editor laugh in my face, just literally just laugh at me. But I would guess that the profit margin from spend to money in the door is coming in. Let's put it this way: closer to 40% than 20%. That's my belief. Again, I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. I have enough, various conversations and proof over the years to suggest no, the profit margin is actually pretty solid. So there's room. There's room in that budget. But a lot of these editors, I mean, junior people who are managing to a portfolio, one, they're not given the budget to hire better talent. And two, I think there's almost a kind of a stigma against spending more money to produce a book. I think there's hey, we'll be looked down upon if we raise the costs and don't pull in as good. Maybe the product's better, maybe that helps us long term, but our numbers in the short term look worse. I think there is kind of that attitude going on as well. Again, no proof, that's a gut feel, but I've had enough conversations with people who have maybe drank a little bit more than they should have. And oh, sorry, there's a cut there. Uh, sorry, I said something I shouldn't have. Just some individuals have said some things. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, leave a comment below. What do you think? Profitability? Do you think they should maybe cut back on their profitability in order to make a better product? What do you think about that idea? Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.